Hello, we are live. My goodness. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Welcome to another episode of Cut the Shit, Cue the Genius. You'll notice our fearless partner, Dalia Elgazar, is not with us. I know she is with so many of you amazing people at IMEX in Frankfurt right now, but we had to hold this show down and keep it going because there are so many important topics to discuss. I'm Liz, super excited to be here with all of you. Michelle, welcome back to another episode. Can you believe we are on, is this episode 4 already?
Seems like a lifetime.
I know. And we have the amazing Rachel Stefan filling in for us from Snowball. You are representing the curly hair for
I'm
Dalia.
representing. I tried to fluff it as much as possible. She told me, make it as big as possible. It's still a little bit wet, so I'm working on it. By the end of the show, it probably will be like this.
It looks good. I have the curly hair, but I refuse to wear it every time. So
Oh, come on, own it. Come on. It could have been like the curly hair show. Michelle will work on your curls.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And I'm super excited also for today's topic and our guest, Allie Gardner. Allie, welcome. I'm going to have Michelle introduce you in just a second. But today we are talking about all kinds of things. A very heavy topic, I think, but one that's very intriguing, very important. Most of all, it's super important for us to talk about. So, Michelle, I know this was a topic that you brought up. We're all excited to talk about it, but do you want to just kind of intro what we're discussing today and tell us a little more about Allie?
Absolutely. So I often think about what the industry could do if we really coalesced around issues that are meaningful to us. And there's lots of examples. One is, in Salt Lake City. This is just one minor example. The Outdoor Retailer Show was there for many years. The organizers, the association, didn't like the way that our state legislature was handling wildlands. So they moved to Denver, stayed away for like 5 years, made, a big impression locally, and now they're coming back. So it was like they made their stand, they went away, now they're coming back. Did it prove anything? Did it work? The whole boycott thing. So I think about that. I also think about the bigger issues, Texas shootings, Ukraine, just lots of things. And also about what we could do as an industry of thousands and thousands of people to effect change in some of those areas and on the issues that we all collectively care about, we say we care about. So I thought to bring in someone that I know is an expert in social activism, community organizing. She's not in our industry, which is perfect because then she can look at us with a keen eye, a keen and critical eye. Like, the question that made you to, talk a little bit about your background to kick us off. But I want to know am I asking for the moon to think that we could organize or at least move in a direction as an industry to make meaningful change on the issues that we care about?
Thanks for inviting me, Michelle, and I'm glad to be here with Rachel and Liz as well. My background, big college activist, social justice activism, protest, rally, riot every day. And that was, the place that I sort of learned that you can do some of this stuff for a living in a little bit of a different way. But I think a formative moment for me was around a really big, I would say, revolutionary political moment in the state of Wisconsin, where I'm from, when Governor Walker put forward a bill to get rid of collective bargaining. And there were some of the largest protests in Wisconsin. This was before Occupy Wall Street. And I was really engaged and active in that. And this is kind of similar to the story, Rachel, you were sharing before the show, and seeing a moment or a time that feels revolutionary and all this change, and you feel like you're in the moment, and then you lose. Then all of the things that you are hoping and pushing for take place and happen anyways. And this is where I began to question, how does power work? How do people, ordinary people who are not billionaires or people in positions of political positions, make change together? What does that look like? And that's how I got connected to community organizing and became an organizer at a nonprofit in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, starting in 2013, and have since been in our network of community organizations organizing people. And we really focus on how do we build power, which is what I want to talk with you all about as an industry that has a ton of power. And what is power? We name it as organized people and organized money. The events industry has a ton of both. And so in terms of capacity and possibility for what the events industry could do in the political climate, I think there's a lot. I think the hardest question is, where do we begin? How do we start? And what could we even take on? I think there's a number of ways to answer this question, beginning with, an internal and external power analysis around where could we affect change in the world. And even before that, who are the people that want to do that? Who's the team? Who's interested in beginning asking these questions? You all are here today asking those questions. There's probably other folks listening, watching that are asking that. But I think it starts with, who are the leaders who want to take on this question, just to begin.
There's something also, like, other than, okay, who's going to do it and all that, it's coming to a common ground to know what is it that we're taking on. And at least agreeing on what is it that we want to change. And then we were just talking about it, there's multiple different causes and purposes and diverging opinions on things. Like, how do you even come together to decide what is it you want to take on? Or it could be like small little groups taking on different things, but they could be going against each other even in that way.
And I think that's why it's starting with building relationships and asking people the question, what do you care most about? What matters to you most? And what would most excite you? Because I said this earlier, but this is your free time we're talking about for the most part. Unless you have paid people working on this, what would you be willing to commit free time to in terms of either changing your industry if you're looking internally, or if you're looking externally, having an impact outside of your industry with your industry as the vehicle? And so I think the center question is, like, do we want to build some power together? And then later the question is, well, okay, what issues would we want to start on? And that is where you're absolutely right. We need to have some common ground, but it doesn't come from here of what issue do I care most about in the world, because everyone's going to answer that differently.
Yeah.
But it's, what issue am I being affected by that I would spend my free time on? And I think I was telling Michelle earlier that we do a lot of listening sessions to figure out what issues we're going to take on as an organization, meaning we go out, we meet with leaders one-on-one. We ask them to organize folks, to have small group meetings where we say, what's the number one thing affecting you and your family that you care about? And I think maybe people wouldn't be surprised to hear almost always people mention the same 6 things, given the political moment, the context, everything. And so I bet the same would happen in the events industry. If you all were to go out and do some listening sessions, people might mention the same 6 things. And it's different to say what's impacting you and what would make an important change in your life and your well-being. What's your interest versus what's the biggest political hot button issue of our time? Those aren't the same thing. And I think leading with, what do you care about? What affects you and the people that you love most deeply? That's where you're going to find people that will spend some of their free time to do something, which is what you're looking for.
And community organizing and examining power structures is different than lobbying, because our associations and groups go to Washington and lobby for things, I guess, to be noticed, to share with political leaders what the impact of our industry is economically and all of those things. But I don't think they're in there pushing for a particular cause or an issue. And you said that's different, Allie.
Yeah, I think, if we start with issue, it will lead us to task. So if we start with, we want to, Roe v. Wade, for example, let's say, starting there. Okay, what would we do first? It immediately leads to what action can we take together, rather than if we're building a relationship around power, it's more about building lots of relationships, building a large base of people that then you have to act collectively on the issues you eventually do decide to take on together. And my recommendation, if I'm making recommendations, is really to stick to what people are most affected by themselves, because that's what's ultimately going to get them to spend their time on it. So if we think about, even let's look at the issues related to the gun lobby, and you all were mentioning, they're a huge part of the event industry, the NRA. And so if we were thinking about, we want to do something related to either, lowering the amount of guns in our country, about putting new restrictions on, who would we be organizing in our industry? What kind of power does our industry have? Do we have relationships with people in the NRA? Do we have relationships with political leaders? How could we either help or hurt their own interests to be able to act on the issues that we care about. But I think, you'd have to find out from your base of people, is that the issue we most care about? Is that the thing that we most want to act on? And it might be yes, depending on who the people are in your industry. I think if there are folks who, if there's a good chunk of people that have kids in schools, that might make sense. I see Rachel asked me the question about what are the 6 things people always mention: childcare, healthcare, education, wages, housing. No one's not mentioning this because it's about what's affecting them on the day-to-day. And I think we have to start from what is impacting me versus what do I care about in my mind? What will I post something about online? Which is different from what will I show up to? And obviously now we're virtually showing up, but what will I spend time thinking about, meeting with people, thinking about this power analysis, because it might make my life different. It might make new possibilities for my family.
It's interesting to say, that's always the same 6 things that are keep mentioning, no matter what the circle you're in. That means that we have more in common than we have different. So we're all if you strip everything away, the core values of everybody around, it's very similar. So if we align around those values that we all have, well, not all have kids, but I mean, the childcare, the housing, all that, it's everything, everybody's affected by that. So why don't we start from a common ground where we all strip everything, go back to the basic and mobilize around that. I mean, it's very romantic as a concept. It's easier said than done. And yet, doesn't happen that way in real life, unfortunately.
I think that's what's interesting about what Ali's saying about organizing, is that if we were to come together as the events industry and really look at the power that we have, which is what Ali's, I think, saying, and then look at the issues, that those of us who are willing to get together, then look at what we have in common. I think it is otherwise easy to get, there's the shooting in Texas and, we all lose our minds about it, but then it splits. Some people believe X is the solution. Other people believe Y is the solution. And that's where I think it feels very, to me at least, impossible to impact change. It's okay, so I'm going to jump on that bandwagon, start posting about what I think. And I wonder though about, it seems like what you're saying, Ali, is that more organized way of doing things as an industry or as a community, and then choosing issues. It's very strategic and not very reactionary, which I guess is what you were saying earlier about the difference between protesting and organizing. I could see that having a lot longer impact. It's just not blown by the wind.
Yeah. And I think it's, first, talking with yourself of, do I want to spend some time building some power in my industry? If I do, for what change would I want for myself? And then it's going out and talking with people and asking them those questions. And you're looking for, do you have mutual interests? And then you're building your team, and it's through relationship, not through just, do we agree about this issue? Because even if you agree about this issue, you might disagree about a million others. So if you're focusing on issue, not relationship, I don't think it's good for democracy. If we're only looking for, do we agree on all of these issues together? That's a really small pool. Do we agree that we as an industry want to make things better for the people in the industry and want to have a better world for our families outside of it, and think about how our industry could make things better for us and our families and the people we care about? And if we agree about that, the other pieces can come up as discourse, but it's really about where do we want to improve our industry and the world around us to improve things for our families, people we care about, for ourselves as leaders in this industry. And I think if starting from there, you're going to find other people that are yes, I agree with that. And then from there, you make decisions about what you're going to work on. If you go out and do, small group listening, and you're, engaging people around these questions, and you hear those same 6 things in the industry, it's then bringing that, to a vote of the team. But it takes a lot of time to build the type of team or organization within your industry that would want to do this. Years. Some organizations I've worked for spend 4 years just creating themselves, building the kinds of relationships that are set up to do this, because they have to be able to get into fights together in terms of a political fight, but also they have to have discourse with each other. They're not going to last. They're going to fall apart the second they disagree.
Rachel, you were talking about your background in Lebanon and this trough of disillusionment, what I would call it, speaking from a technology perspective. Talk about it. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear Ellie's comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how everybody known that originally I come from Lebanon, so I lived through war, 25 years, grew up in war. I saw a lot of things that I don't wish anybody can see sees, and there's a lot of things and corruption and things that you wish can change. I was part of people going down on the street and protesting and shouting and all that and trying to make a change. And then everybody gets together, and I mean, 2 years ago when there was an explosion that happened too, like in the port of Beirut, almost like a nuclear size explosion. Everybody went down on the street. They were fed up. They wanted to overturn the government, the whole thing. It's like we got all excited, all the way from here. You're like cheering for your people back home. It's happening. Finally, it's gonna happen. You get excited, all riled up, and then where are they today? Everybody went back home, back to their jobs, and nothing happened. So I feel a little bit, discouraged and powerless when it comes to this. So it's almost like, okay, do I want to be involved? Because emotionally, I care about that one. I value that. It's my home, my second home. But then I feel the anger and the frustration that builds up, and it just eats me inside. It's like, I don't need this. I don't need this. And then I just like block it and then continue with my day here. But unfortunately, they're suffering. They have like the brain drain. People are leaving, and they're still seeing the same people in power. Nothing changes with small little increments. Like they just had the election, and then there's 15 new seats from the revolutionary people that wanted the change are now inside the government. But then that's going to take a long time, and maybe they'll flip. Maybe they'll buy them out. I don't have a lot of faith, to be honest with you, knowing the history and all that. So I kind of give up in a way. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm sure like there's a lot of people, they see this, they think, okay, yay, they're gonna change, and then dies down after that. So it's like, what's the point of doing something?
And I think for me, I think organizing has always given me hope. And I feel like there was a real time when I stopped going to any kind of protests and rallies. And I was organizing at the time, but like I said, we weren't organizing protests and rallies. We were organizing small groups of people to hear about one particular neighborhood and the housing issues they were facing. And the hope came from watching leaders testify at these small hearings with their city council people about a way that counselor could make a change that leader had researched. That is where my hope came. It stopped coming from, I still feel some hope sometimes when I see the rallies and the protests, for sure. But I think when I have been deeply engaged in something local that I can see and feel with other people that I know care about that and are working together, developing the team, my hope always comes from being on a team. I think most people feel hopeless and powerless because we're really isolated in a number of ways right now. Like to watch the scrolling of what's happening on the screen internationally. And I think honestly, part of the reason why I organize is to maintain hope in the world. Like is to see people every day saying, I'm gonna spend my free time doing this in my life to make it better for my community, to make it better for me. And so I think if there's a first step, it's like really having those one-on-one conversations with people that bring you hope. Building relationships almost always brings us hope. Building connections with other people who care always brings us hope. And then thinking about what's something local. We always start with also something local and smaller. And I know it's not the answer to the question of like, how do we, defeat white supremacy and all these other things. That's not the answer to the question, but I do think there's ways to engage that also help us have hope, which we need.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we in an industry that is alleged to covet connection? So why aren't we able to, or haven't we coalesced around some things we care about? Anyway, Liz?
Well, I mean, it makes me think of the Live Events Coalition. I think that's one way that we've seen the events industry come together, and it's maybe not around one of these. I think it is actually around one of these 6 hot button issues. But really, because COVID hit, most of our industry was out of work. Things changed dramatically. And I think that was a catalyst for a group of people coming together and saying, people don't understand the value that the events industry has in this world. And there's all this relief going out to restaurants and different kinds of organizations, but the events industry, though we power a lot of what happens in the world, was mostly going unseen. And I've seen a lot of their work over the past few years in terms of, Ali, what you were talking about, just understanding the power that we do have, putting some numbers around it, looking at what is that power. And, you're making me think today, Michelle, even as you said, we are an industry that is designed to bring people together. And I think we do that frequently, but maybe not as strategically as we could be doing to impact change. And I agree that I would love to see global change. I'm definitely an over optimist. I'm like, but there's a good heart in everyone, and we're all it's gonna come. It's gonna, but there is some organizing and action that has to happen around that. But it's interesting. I mean, I haven't been that involved, honestly, with the Live Events Coalition. I think it's similar to what Rachel's saying, is that I see a lot of this stuff happening and just kind of like, I'll sign my name when it comes around and I'll post on social media. But, getting super involved in Ali, to your point, that's your free time. And it's hard to put that towards something that you're not sure is going to make a huge change on any issue.
Yeah.
So
I feel like the small, like I like when you bring it down to small things. And yes, and I have very global goals, and I'm happy Liz has the same goals as me. We want to see that big change happen, but when you bring it back to, yes, it's small little change that give you hope. That, yes, it makes total sense, because that feel like, okay, yes, I was able to do this. So you feel like reassured that whatever action you're taking is actually producing some result. And then you build on that. But but I'm not a patient person. That's the problem.
I'm not either. And so being involved in work that is the long-term approach, that is the long game, has to also include short-term wins. And those wins can look differently in all kinds of ways. And so, but it is the long game for sure. It's decades. I think about organizations that it took them decades to be able to win something big citywide, like tens of millions of dollars for affordable housing, for example. But it comes to mind to me, like, where is the event for people in the event industry to talk about the kind of political change they want to make, or really the kind of ways to improve the industry itself and the world around them? Like that seems like the event. And, what are the one-to-one meetings being done with like folks at the Live Events Coalition about what's working, what's not, where, what are they hearing? What are they learning through this process? What do they know, and what's the knowledge they can share? And then where do they see limits? And really bringing people together around what would make our lives better, starting with us. I think there's a deep desire to like advocate for others, especially like in this moment where we're seeing so much like everything international and national is like covering our screen all day. But what are the things that would also make our lives better? And how is that connected to this other context, of course? But I do think it's starting there. I would love to see that event.
So, Ellie, you said you don't believe that change starts with one person. Explain that, because we're all talking about, let's start like on a local level and start getting people talking and all that, but it sounds like it takes more than one person.
Yeah, but I think if you've got two or three, you can start there. And who do you know? And then who do you go out and that you already have relationships with, or that you're inspired by? I love like setting up one-to-one meetings with people that I'm just super inspired by, to see, do we have mutual interests? And sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. But I think what I mean by it's not just one person is that it's not one person alone. Maybe one person begins things, but then it's, hundreds, thousands of other people that are making this stuff happen, especially in a world where we have so many billionaires. Like, we need a whole ton of people to combat like billionaire power. And this is a struggle I have when I think about, the big scale issues over the local, when you see, Jeff Bezos flying to the moon or whatever, and then the rest of us just trying to make sure that like our neighbors don't get evicted, or like our neighborhood doesn't get gentrified, or whatever it is. I think it can be hard. So I think focusing on the local is helpful, and focusing on building a team so you don't feel like you're alone. Powerlessness for me materializes in feeling like I'm alone in this. I'm helpless. What can I do? But when I'm part of a team, I'm looking around at other people that are brilliant, that inspire me, that know a ton of other people and are cultivating those relationships. It feels different. And that matters. The part about having some hope and we could do something. Maybe we can't, change the world tomorrow, but we could do something in our industry over the course of the next 5 years. And I think that should be more of the question. what the long short term, the 5 years, the 2 years.
And the alternative is doing nothing. And what
Yeah.
will happen if you sit back and do nothing?
And we talked about this, Michelle, on the phone the other day, but also part of this for me is about what kind of person do I want to be in the world? And like, do I want a part of myself to be political, to be in this public sort of sphere of change making? And for me, the answer is yes. Like, I do want to have a part of me that is engaged in political life, not in the political life we see on TV. Political life meaning like really like, engaging in discourse, being able to make an impact on things that impact people I care about, those kinds of things. And that way, yes, of course. Even simple things like the county where I live in Oaxaca, Mexico, has not fixed the street. So every time I am driving into my house, my car is getting messed up. I want to work with my neighbors to get that fixed. That's politics.
And where the power of money comes in. I mean, you just talked about Bezos. I mean, yes, we're idealistic. We're thinking about this coming together, power of people, but then you have the power of money. They'll buy everything. They'll buy people. And it's funny. I'm watching Ozark, and that's probably where, but everything. I know I'm late to the game, but man, oh man, but it is so true. In many ways.
Power is organized people and organized money. And I don't think we should think about, we're the organized people part. We also need to organize our money as ordinary people. We'll never have enough money as some of those that have tons beyond us. But I think them buying people, like you said, is so true, which is why the relationships have to be our base. Like, do we care about it, or do we trust each other? Can I be bought? Can you be bought in this situation, or are my relationships so strong? That has happened so many times even in our organizing work, where powerful people have tried to either donate money to institutions we're working with to get them to stop working on a campaign. Like, that really happens. It's happened multiple times, and sometimes it does happen, and other times people say, no, this is my organization. This is my team. I'm not leaving my team. You can't make me leave my team. But I think really thinking about maximizing our organized power, our organized people and organized money is how we can begin to engage with people who have a lot more power than us individually.
So how do you channel money from businesses primarily into causes that we can all, or a cause we can all agree upon, other than causes that benefit us as businesses?
I think it's
causes that benefit us as humans.
Yeah, I think it's like relationships, understanding their interests. There might be some businesses you all have worked with for a number of years, clients that you've helped organize events for, that a lot about what their interests are. Maybe you don't, and it's asking those questions, and you're not asking their opinions on politics. We're asking like, how have you been affected by COVID? How's your business been affected? What about your employees? What's like, keeping you up at night, or what's getting you up in the morning? What's exciting to you right now? What are your hopes and dreams for your work, for your family, for your community? Who do you consider your community? Beginning to really understand them as a whole person, so you could begin to understand what kind of invitations you can make to them about ways they can contribute to act on their values. Because if someone asks me to like donate to the SEALs, maybe I'll give them like $5. If I, have been in deep relationship with someone for years who works with these SEALs, like this woman, Louisa, who helped us on our boat over the weekend. And she was like, look, I've been working here for this many years. I know that you care about, the environment. I know these other things about you. Would you be willing to contribute this amount? Then I'd probably be more likely to. But I think it comes back to understanding people's interests. What do people care about? Where are our mutual interests? And in the cases where we're talking about a campaign to change things and there's a person who can say yes or no, it's really about thinking about how can I help that person's interest or hurt it? And how can we as an event industry, if we're talking about an external issue, help or hurt that person's interest? And I think if it's about how can we get more businesses that engage with our industry to contribute around things we care about, it's really understanding, well, what would they want to give to? What would they want to contribute to in a way that felt meaningful for them?
Liz, I know you're going to close out the program shortly, but I'm wondering if the next generation, the Zs and the Alphas, are going to push on this more than the Boomers and the Gen Xs. Because look how long it's taken for people to ask suppliers, for example, to produce their sustainability bona fides, let's just say, and now we're asking for yet something else. So I'm wondering if this is something that the next couple of generations coming in are going to really lean in on.
I hope so. I think that we've seen younger generations, it's been talked about that they're more cause oriented, that they want the organizations that they work for, that they buy from, to be more aligned with their goals. And I would love to see that has an impact. I also am concerned, though, that there's desensitization around some of these issues. I heard, God, I don't even know if it was like a social media. I saw somewhere on social media that someone asked their teenager after the shooting, like, oh, how was school today after the shooting had just happened the day before? And the kid said, well, what are we supposed to feel? It's just like so run of the mill that these mass shootings happen in schools that like kids don't even necessarily recognize that they don't pay attention to it. So I'm concerned about that as well. I don't know. I mean, I think just what we've talked about, even in 30 minutes, this is such a complex topic. I'm inspired by what Ali shared around shared goals. I think, Anne said it in one of the comments as well. If you look at those 6 hot button issues, we are, things matter to us, like safety, freedom, protection, as compared to if you look at the very specific minute details, like what do we each feel about gun control, or how do we each feel about, gay rights or something. Those become much more complex things. And if we can find our commonality and organize around the change that we would like to see positively around, I think those 6 hot button issues to me are, as Rachel said, those are so important to come back to, because those are the common ground across all the things that we do. And then whether we start at a super local level or we look at the power our industry has, I mean, I don't know where it goes from here, but this is what I love about this show, is that we're just talking about the stuff that we're not going to wrap it up in 30 minutes. I wish we could, but at least we have put some thought around it. I loved the comments, seeing, some of those comments coming from the people watching. And hopefully we'll get more as people continue to listen. So I hate to wrap it up, but Ali, thank you so much for joining us. And Rachel, for being our guest. You'll have to bring your curly hair back on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Michelle, thank you for bringing up this topic. It was super interesting, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going and not just, give up because it's hard. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Have a good
See you
day.
next week.
We'll see you all next week.
Bye.